designer stitching over there. But the uniformity here is...
There's some real fashionable tears designed into these clothes.
And they're both slashers. Hey guys.
Hey everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to Happywax TV, and let's talk horror, and this is episode 8, correct?
Episode number 8.
Hey, we made it. Let's toast. Toast to 8.
Number 8.
Yeah. Alright.
Now that we've all shared DNA.
Yeah.
And tonight's
What's
episode,
going on?
Yeah. We are talking the... What are we going to... You go ahead, because this is your baby.
All right. So, I thought it would be kind of neat to give a little breakdown on one of the most popular genres of horror movies, which is a slasher film. So maybe get a little bit of history in there, some background on the slasher film, and yeah, that's sort of the plan.
Cool.
Jason, Mother is talking to you.
I forgot my wig.
Yeah.
I forgot my wig. All right, so most of this information is going to be coming off of the wiki page under slasher film. So if you want to do some more reading, just look it up on that. But I'll tip over a couple things because a lot of what we've actually been talking about here exists because of this and the information contained within.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just sort of give you the breakdown. So slasher film is a film in the subgenre of horror films involving a violent psychopath stalking and murdering a group of people, usually by use of bladed tools. The term slasher is often used informally as a generic term for any horror film involving murder. Film analysts cite an established set of characteristics with these films, which set these films apart from other subgenres, such as splatter films and psychological thrillers. Now, there's, the slasher film just wasn't born, it was created. So critics cite the Italian Giallo films, which are fantastic. If you've never seen any, look up Giallo. Gialli films, I believe that means yellow.
Not to be
Italian.
confused with Jello.
Yes,
Brand
not,
gelatin.
not Jello. Giallo. I've watched so many of those with my wife, and they're fantastic. Because they're pretty weird.
Yep.
On there. So Giallo films and psychological thrillers are sort of cited as the start there. And 1960s was the beginning. So Peeping Tom is one of the psychological thrillers, and Psycho.
Same year.
Yeah, both 1960 as early influence.
Yep.
And it says here the genre hit its peak between 1978 and 1984, which is referred to as the golden age of slasher films. And that means a lot to the three of us here in this room because that's what we experienced. We went through the golden age, and maybe that's why we have our particular views on horror films. There was such a big thing.
We said that about horror films in general a few episodes ago. I can't remember what topic it was, but we called that era 78 to about 88 or something like that, or something. It's a golden era for us, but
Well, listen to some of the notable names, and you'll know exactly why. You have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Halloween, 1978. Friday the 13th, 1980. Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. Child's Play, 1988. Going a little, further in history, you've got Scream, 96, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, 97, Urban Legend, and basically a lot of the films that are mentioned in this slasher subgenre of horror are films that are released decades ago and then continue to attract a cult following.
Yep.
Sleepaway Camp. That's another good one.
Yeah, that's one we haven't even touched on that one. And
I like that one.
That was a great
I actually have the Sleepaway Camp first aid kit right here.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
Yeah, but that movie, if you haven't seen it, definitely watch it.
Oh, I dropped it.
Oh.
It was one of those ones I was watching as a 13-year-old boy. It was very shocking.
Sleepaway Camp. Oh, yeah, it was.
So, a couple other things I'd like to mention there. The definition of a slasher film is basically slasher films adhere to a specific formula. A past wrongful action causes severe trauma that is reinforced by a commemoration or anniversary that reactivates or re-inspires the killer.
Mm-hmm.
Built around stalk and murder sequences, the film draws upon audience feelings of catharsis, recreation, and displacement as related to sexual pleasure. So, in that statement there, that sums up
Yeah. Yep.
so many, horror movies on there.
That's why they call you Dr. Professor Anthony Story.
I use the power of the internet.
The power of the internet. Yeah, because would you have anything you wanna? When you go ahead.
No, it's
When you said slasher films, I was all kind of nervous because I like to tend to think that I know a lot about horror movies, and I don't know fucking anything about slasher films. So, so I kind of researched a little bit all week, and I found out some pretty cool stuff because, I guess I'm more interested in it now because I didn't know much about it. I mean, you watch the movies, but you just watch the movies. I never classify them as slasher films. And then when you brought up the topic, I thought, oh, that's awesome. But in my head, I'm going, fuck, I know nothing. So, but I did, like I said, did this research. So, the stuff that I read or that I found out was, and you brought up the Giallo style Italian brand of horror, has a lot of similarities to the U.S., where it's very violent and sexual. The killer's usually faceless in the beginning. Maybe not so much now. You see them more and more. Back in the 60s, a lot of the stuff I did was in the 60s and 70s where they are faceless, you know what I mean? And then the thing with a lot of the Italian horrors in the 60s is the endings are always very confusing for the most part, you know what I mean?
Supernatural elements, which is kind of thrown in.
Yeah, and there's two names that, Dario Argento, who they're saying is kind of like the Italian Hitchcock, and then the Godfather they're calling is Mario Bava, right? And his movie Bay of Blood, which I have seen, and it's funny because I totally forgot about this, but there was so many kill scenes in that movie that you could tell they used them in Friday the 13th Part 2. Pretty much almost all the kills in his movie from the 60s they've used it in that fucking second Friday the 13th, which I thought was really cool.
That's awesome.
And then the other thing too, when I watched a quick video, I think it was, what's today? Thursday? It was Tuesday. I watched a quick video on it, and I just, for whatever, as background. And the one guy was talking about the comparison between Black Christmas and Halloween, right? They came out right around the same time, but because Black Christmas, which probably was not the original, but slasher movie because it wasn't, but had it been like a U.S. movie, it probably would have been bigger, if not as big as Halloween. But because Halloween was a U.S. and had a lot more, it was more visible, whereas Black Christmas was kind of Canadian, and it's like, who the fuck watches a Canadian movie?
Freaking pick on the Canadians, eh?
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Bitches.
But it's true.
Posers.
Yeah, but Black Christmas is a fucking great movie, and it's a great slasher film. You know what I mean? And it has all the
a Christmas slasher.
Yeah, it's got everything in it as far as what you were saying
Blood
about.
was splattered by the stockings one night.
Yeah.
As the Christmas bulbs all burned real bright.
Right.
Black Christmas was one of the staple films, along with many of the others.
Yeah.
From this era that was
Yep.
around in the families. You go to the family's house and they would watch all these movies, and lo and behold, Black Christmas.
Yep. Yeah. It's a great movie. It still gives me the creeps today. Sadly, it was remade. The remake was fucking terrible.
Yeah.
But the original, you didn't like the remake? You did like the remake?
I didn't actually watch it.
Yeah, don't.
Once again, there are some things I'm just like,
yeah.
If I don't see that it needs it,
yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, but it's funny too because I had written down here in the '80s, slasher films really took off.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I still remember.
But they died out too, though.
Oh yeah,
pretty quick.
absolutely.
Like they kind of died out in the '80s too,
Yep.
right? So.
Yeah, but I still and I brought this one too. The Burning is one of my, I guess, again, up until you brought it up, when I saw these, I just said, oh, it's a horror movie. But I guess technically it is a slasher movie, and it's got one of my favorite fucking killing scenes in it is on the raft, and it's Tom Savini, of all people. And, this is, like, for the time it came out, and this guy goes to fucking town on these people on this raft, and it looks fucking real, or as real as it could get for that time, and it's Tom Savini's work. I think it's some of his best work, even better than the stuff he did in Friday the 13th myself. But Yeah, he fucking killed it. So see what I did there?
He slashed it up, cut him up.
Yeah, but no, the raft scene from The Burning is definitely one of my faves. But I mean, there's so many. I know. Do you have a list? Like I got more stuff I can talk about. I got all the shit written down.
Oh,
but I mean, go for it. But if we're gonna talk movies, I mean, like, and you listed a bunch off, like Halloween, Black Christmas, Friday the 13th. Like these are all kind of the ones that all kind of came out that made it really big, right? And then I guess you can say even Nightmare on Elm Street to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Well, technically it was considered one, right?
Yeah.
But,
So that's kind of pushing the envelope.
The thing with the in the golden age
Yeah.
of the movies, these are the ones that actually became commercially successful.
Yeah.
Where that was the oddity, right?
Yeah.
Because a horror film was always like not the main, you know.
Yeah. Well, two big.
well, they faced a lot of problems with political correctness and everything else too,
Yeah.
right? Exploitation of women.
Well, they
everything
didn't
else.
have. It wasn't as politically. It wasn't politically incorrect then. They had a lot more free reign.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they had a lot of people that were against. That's why they got PG down and everything else, right?
Well, I think that was the worst thing
that's
that could have happened
I think
to
that was a little
slasher
later,
film.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because we know the MPAA ratings didn't come out till was it a month after?
Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah. So that started a long time ago, and of course, anytime you put something out that's going to be racy, there's going to be a group somewhere that's going to have.
Oh yeah.
You know, but in retrospect, I think they were a lot more free back then to do these things, because a lot of what if you watch these old movies, they are kind of it's like being in a time machine, looking back to a certain time, and you see what's the things that they put into the movies.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, this would never fly today.
Yeah.
Not in a million years.
Yeah. Well, I think we definitely grew up in a time where horror movies were like in that golden era, like you were saying. We did see some good movies, and nowadays it's like there was that. Okay, so there was that golden era, right? And then there was like every movie that comes out is shit era because it's all PG because they want to have everybody see this movie, not just the restricted audience, because it's all about making money. And now they've gone back to more restricted movies, but it's like how over the top and how much can we cram in your face again? You know what I mean? And that's what it's kind of got to. And a lot of times it works, but a lot of times it doesn't, and it's more of a turnoff. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
They actually have them broken down in ages. The golden age is 84 or 78 to 84. Silver age is 85 to 95. Bronze age is 96 to 03, and then modern age is 2004 to 13, and then
it goes to
postmodern.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, is 14 to present.
Yeah. Well,
but I don't know. Like, I was kind of wondering what a few things about, like, where they started, and if you go right back to like the 1900s, there was a theater called the Grand Guignol, and they played like short films and stuff like Lunatics,
yeah.
and it said use visceral violence to attract the Guignol's audience, and these kind of movies eventually led at that time to public outcry, and they sort of banned them, or it had led to the Hays Code, which the Hays Code is one of the entertainment industry's earliest set of guidelines restricting sexuality and violence deemed unacceptable. So I think from then on they were sort of fighting that, right?
Yeah.
But it would have been cool to see some of the plays, like.
Yeah.
So they started off as slasher plays with lots of violence and sexuality, like what would that have been like, right? The turn of the century, that would have freaked people right the hell out, like on stage live. And then we were talking about before, like whether or not Blood and Black Lace, the Giallo movie.
Okay, yeah.
Like maybe you guys can help us out. Was that the first masked slasher
or Masked Killer and Mario Bava's Chow?
Yeah, like was he the first one? Does anybody know of any others like that were before that? That was 64.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, people have been fascinated with why do they exist? Like, what is it about watching people's getting slaughtered that that make you want
to me
tune
it's the taboo thing, right? Like it's in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill, and that's one of the first ones. If it's not the first one, I don't remember my Sunday school lessons, but you know, it's a pretty important one on there, and you know, it started with psychological thrillers, right? Because to me that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You're usually looking. A lot of the movies are in the perspective, or at least have shots that are in perspective of the killer, right? And then they, over the years, they did some changing around where they took the view of the other person, the victim type, or the survivor, the one that's going to be the survivor.
Well, we can only, like, I mean, we're so, like, nowadays everybody's so desensitized, and we became so desensitized in the golden age. But can you imagine being an audience in 1960 watching Janet Leigh get stabbed to death in a, like, all you had to do is have the knife do this, and then show the blood on the floor of the shower in Psycho, and people would be completely freaked out.
Well, that
because, you know, I mean, I remember talking to a friend of mine who was from Newfoundland. Him and his wife lived here in town, and I remember him telling a story about going to see Rosemary's Baby, which isn't a slasher film, but like they were sort of devout Catholics, and it was 1968, and they didn't know what this movie was about, right? And they went to see it, and they were literally terrified for like weeks after. They couldn't believe that people. So imagine like another 8 years before that, and you're actually showing this at that time such a graphic, you know, death scene. It would have had way more of an impact on people then than now.
And that's why I think it's so fascinating, right? Because now, with the power of the internet and the Googles.
Yeah.
Magic Google's on, and I can see anything. And that whole desensitization, it's like, you know, oh, another person's got their throat slit, or oh, there's another disembowelment. It used to be, you know, you'd watch, especially when I was younger, I would want to watch a movie and it'd be like, okay, what am I going to see? Right? What can they show? And it'd be like, you would want to see the bloodiest kills. How do they do that? You know, like, what's this new... What's the new kill going to be?
Yeah, in the space of like 19 years, you go from, you know, seeing the knife go up and down, some blood on the floor in the shower, and her pulling the shower curtain down, to seeing, you know, Maniac jump on the hood of the car and blow fucking Tom Savini's head right apart, fucking, you know, or the head's blown off in Dawn of the Dead, you know what I mean? Like that was like the head explosion, you know.
Maniac, by the way, I think is one of my favorites.
Me too. I was going to say I have a couple.
I never mention it. I think I mentioned maybe in a past one that the remake was completely terrible.
Yeah, you did.
But yeah, just because it was such a travesty compared to the original.
Well, Tom Savini was in his heyday with these slasher movies, right? Because I was going to bring a movie up called The Prowler.
Okay.
Right. I think that was his first movie. He actually did special effects, and I think, but then The Burning, and then also Maniac. Right. He did the special and the Friday the 13th. You know what I mean? So he was in his heyday when he was, you know, Tom Savini must love the slasher films because he was all over the place. But The Prowler is a great movie if you haven't had a chance to see that. It's a good slasher flick, and I like that era of slasher flicks too because a lot of times, same with Black Christmas and the Prowler and The Burning, where you'd see through, like they would try and make the camera, you could see through the eyes of the slasher, you know what I mean, as they're coming towards the person.
Sometimes they put the mask on or something.
Yeah, so I kind of like that, and we don't really see that anymore in these movies.
Like the other one, what was the one where the guy wears the gas mask and
My Bloody Valentine. That's a fucking great movie.
Yeah, that's a great.
Didn't they reboot that?
Oh
too?
yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly,
the original one.
Sadly, yes. Yeah, the original is awesome. So.
I got the shirt.
Yeah, Tom Savini, Prowler, 1981. So that was 1981.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there were so many of them, like The Town That Dreaded Sundown. That was a really
a great movie.
Mid-70s one, you know, that was kind of creepy. And, I mean, it's funny how you go from, you know, how quickly you got desensitized. And I think that's probably what the downward sort of trend was until they kind of chilled out until Scream and then I Know What You Did Last Summer and stuff like that, you know, kind of revitalized.
Late 90s.
Yeah, well, see, that was the big down. See, Scream was, as much as I hate to say it because I didn't really like all the sequels and stuff, but Scream really was a good slasher flick.
The first one.
The first one was, but then the rest of them were shit. But then like you said, I Know What You Did Last Summer and what other ones when they are all PG, you know what I mean, and they were just horrible. And I think that was a downfall because they turned them into teeny bopper movies.
Yeah.
And like, who the fuck wants to watch that? If you're a hardcore horror fan, I know I don't.
As somebody who enjoys the genre of horror and the limitless possibilities of what you can actually do in that genre, just to see what things get reduced down to, but you know, it can be really sad. Yeah, and there's I'll tell you, like, I've lost a lot of faith in these big budget horror movies that come out. I'd rather just stick to stuff that I find, you know, video on demand, or like you know, a low budgeted movie, because you know what you're gonna get, and you know, they have to go for the audience that's gonna watch it. So a lot of times it's rated R, and it's got the blood in it, and it's a lot of practical effects. So you know, if you find, I don't have any recent movies off the top of my head that I can give you, but you know, there's so many good slasher style films that are out there, but if you're waiting for big ones to come to the theater, you're probably going to be disappointed, because a good chunk of those are going to be shit. So you'd be, you know, better off trying to find some low budgeted stuff on Shudder, or maybe on, you know, even Netflix. You'll find the odd one there too, you know what I mean? So I remember back in the day, God, I don't know how many years ago it was, but kind of one of the first, well, I think it was actually the first horror movie streaming channel called Scream. Okay. Yeah.
And I used to watch that all the time, and they used to have some good flicks on there too. You know what I mean? But they are out there. But I mean, you just got to search them out, and it's usually the low budgeted movies are back to more of that golden era style slasher flick, as opposed to the newer ones that come out at the big. I don't know. It's just they just don't hit the same chord.
Yeah.
So
I find the newer movies try to make. Almost to try to make it like a roller coaster ride with like all these jump scares, and it's like, okay, now it's quiet, so here comes a loud noise.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's the jump scares too. It drives me nuts. So,
well, you kind of gotta, like, you know, and then the extreme. I don't know if torture porn's like Hostel, or you know.
Well, even a Serbian film. That's torture porn.
I just won't watch.
Yeah, it's fucking
because
terrible.
Once again, in that category of I know about it, I've heard the whole rundown.
Yeah.
My wife has watched it, and I'm like, you know what? That's one I do not need to see.
Yeah, and I watched it once, and I'll never watch it again. Yeah. So it's just, he was just going for, so it's really not that good of a fucking movie, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So, but what's there some new ones here? I'm just curious now, because some slasher films.
There's some on Netflix. Who Dies Next or something like that. That's one,
and that one's actually pretty good.
Yeah. So I mean, they're modern ones.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think that came out, which is it's not really a brand new concept, but they remind me of slasher films, are the home invasion films.
Oh yeah.
Like You're Next.
Yeah.
That actually turned out really well. And
The Purge.
You know,
to a certain extent, they have the elements. But that's what I mean. Like, you know, Hostel was almost like an extreme slasher flick, like just, you know, constant, you know.
Because that one's kind of like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre style, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like gore, and you don't exactly know why. It's just you're there, wrong place, wrong time, and you've run into some real creepy people.
Yeah.
And they're gonna do some real bad shit.
There was a real creepy element to that first Hostel, but again, that got boring really quick too to me. Like, it was like, okay, well, you know, we have like 13 freaking Hostel movies now. Like, you know, but
the first one worth watching.
Yeah, the first one had unnerving elements because it was so graphic, I suppose. Yeah. But you know,
but that's, you know, the slasher movie is, it's the one where you basically have one main character.
Yeah.
You follow the character through the movie, whether
one protagonist.
Yeah. On that one, and there's so much that can be done with it, and there has been so much that has been done with it. So it's, you know, it is in my mind probably the staple of the horror films, just because my experience.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going through a list of slasher films here, and I mean, they've changed so much over the years from back because I mean, this is a list on IMDb of the top slasher films of the last 10 years, and I'm like, okay, so and I don't know, I'll just rhyme these off. So if I say The Hills Have Eyes, would you consider that a slasher film?
I wouldn't really know.
Okay, because they're saying that's number 1. And then Wrong Turn. Remember that movie with the freaks, the inbred family there?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would never consider that to be a slasher film, but they're... And then Cold Prey, I don't know. But then Frontiers, I would consider that well, I don't even know if I consider that that's a fucking good movie, but I wouldn't consider it a slasher film. And then Wolf Creek.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like that
was the Australian one?
Yeah, which is fucking awesome. Again, that's kind of borderline. And then High Tension. I guess you could consider that a slasher film. That's a fucking awesome movie. And then they got the new Halloween, and then The Collector. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
That was a fucking great movie, so I would consider that one. But then they got Hills of Ice 2, and then See No Evil, and then Hatchet. But I wouldn't...
Yeah, Hatchet.
Well, Hatchet technically is, because
it's a bladed weapon.
It's a classic, you know.
Yeah, and then The Devil's Rejects, and then
What's
Texas
his
Chainsaw
name?
Massacre.
Hatchet. Shit. The guy's name.
Nurse Hatchet.
That's... oh, why can I fucking... That's Kane Hodder playing...
Yeah. There's a name for him.
Yeah. I've got all the fucking movies. What can I think of it? Victor Crowley.
Victor Crowley. That's it.
That's by Kane Hodder, and there's 4 of those now. So, but yeah, I don't know. I just see, but when I think of movies like that, I guess it's bladed, so it fits in the category. But I wouldn't think of, Hatchet as a slasher movie. But it's just, again, I'm not well versed in the slasher films. So I get, I've seen 1,000 of them, but I don't categorize them as that. So, but that's why I was like, I like that you brought that up, because it's something I don't really know much about or think much about. So now I know a hell of a lot more about it. So.
Yes, and that's what we want to do.
Yes, and I hope that you guys have learned something from us if you're ignorant to the slasher film like I am, because I didn't really know all that much, and now I know a little bit more about it. So,
Yep.
but
there's so much more to know.
yeah, I mean there's tons, but I didn't know. I mean, I could be wrong. You guys probably correct me, but the one interview that I listened to was the one film guy. He wrote a book. I can't remember what his name is, but it was called the Rise and the Downfall of the Slasher Film. But he was saying that Psycho was the first mainstream movie to be like a slasher film, and then they kind of came from there. Like you pointed out plays from the early 1900s and stuff like that. But this guy was saying like the first mainstream movie to show a knife style slasher killing was Psycho, and then it was game on from then. And then the Italians fucking got into the game with your giallo style.
The problem with Italian movies is they're so convoluted and hard to follow.
Yeah.
It's like they don't have a plot.
Yeah,
Like,
I lose interest
they just write a movie
Yep.
with no end in sight. They just start writing. Yeah, but
You
Gino and Louise is going on a drive. Okay, they're driving it down here, and they're going to turn there. Okay.
Like the Matrix Part 3.
Oh God, it's like like you just it's like okay. Usually when you write something, you got an ending in mind, and you got a beginning, and you got some form of clear path getting there.
Yeah.
Well, the Italians just like going around in circles.
Yeah.
It's like squirrel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. But
shit.
I don't know.
I think it's meant to confuse the audience, because they do throw in a lot of weird random stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just how they do the films, and they're interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I think these days to get a good slasher film, you've got to have like an incredibly good story.
Yeah.
Because it's so colored by numbers. Unless you're like 13 years old, you've never seen one before, and it'll do the same thing it did when we watched them.
Yeah.
But that's why like Scream, and even to a certain degree, the first I Know What You Did Last Summer, like they at least had good plots and plot twists and stuff, and you didn't know what was going on. And that's really what made Scream, because it was almost like a mystery wrapped up in a slasher film.
Yep.
Right? Because just getting behind the old it's just not doing it, man. Because I think a while ago I said I watched up to like 6 or 7 of these. You know what I mean? And I was just laughing because they were so bad. It was just like, holy crap! I can't believe we.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up. Batteries are gonna die. I hope you guys learned something about slasher films. I certainly know I did, because I didn't really know much about them. So I appreciate, the topic. It was awesome. And okay, if you guys have a top 5 slasher film, or if you want to leave any comments, make sure you do it down below. And we really got to go. So, slasher films, this is probably part 1. We can come back to this and talk about it later. And yeah, guys, until next time.
Stay
Stay
scared.
scared.
Stay scared.